All right, welcome to Books on Tap Live. PW's ongoing author video interview series. Today, we're going to be talking to author Alex de Campi and artist Erica Henderson, the creators of, and I love to say it, Dracula, motherfucker. My name is Calvin Reed. I'm a senior news editor at Publishers Weekly, editor of PW Comics World, PW's online coverage of comics, and I'm a co-host of More to Come, PW's weekly podcast on comics and pop culture. How you doing, Alex? How you doing, Erica?
Good.
Good. Yeah.
Look, today's event is sponsored by Image Comics. And before we get to talking with these two authors, let me give you a few things. We're giving away a limited number of copies of the book. Enter to win by going to publishersweekly.com/DeCampi Henderson. I think this will be scrolling across the bottom of the screen at some point. We've also dropped a link to the page in the comments section on Facebook and on YouTube. During the event, audience members can ask questions by writing them in the comments section on Facebook and on YouTube, and we'll try and answer as many as possible after a certain portion of the interview. If you'd like to receive notifications of future events, sign up at publishersweekly.com/books on tap live. Now, what can I say about this book that the title hasn't said already? Dracula, huh? Let's talk about that motherfucker. Okay. But first, let me give you a little brief intros of our two creators, and then maybe they can say a little bit more about themselves later. Alice de Campi writes comics. She's best known for her critically acclaimed teen survival thriller, No Mercy, done with the fabulous Carla Speed McNeil, and the groundbreaking digital native comic Valentine. Her latest work is a miniseries, Mayday. She's been nominated for an Eisner. I talked to her not too long ago about Bad Girls, another awesome book that she's done with Victor Santos. You'll want to check that out too. Erica Henderson is a multiple Eisner award-winning comics artist, known for The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, Jughead, and other things, and soon to be known for Dracula, motherfucker. So, how many times will I get to say that before this is over? Look, welcome to both of you. Let's just start talking right now. Look. The first thing I want to ask you: talk about that awesome, meaningful, and I would guess very fun title. The fun title of this book. How do we get to there?
The title came first. I was joking around on Twitter with my friend Christopher Cooper. He's an artist. Used to be in LA. Now he's in Austin. He's really, if you saw his art, you knew exactly who he was. He shares my loves of classic cars and grindhouse films and just talking smack on Twitter. And he posted something saying, "Okay, ladies, after what classic character would you name your vagina? Don't say Miss Havisham." And I just responded, "Dracula, motherfucker." And there was this pause, and then both of us replied to each other like, "Yeah, this is going to be a book someday." And it was. And the great thing about Dracula, motherfucker, as a title is you don't need to say anything else. I have one of my close friends in New York, this guy Kwanzaa. I said, "Yeah, my next book's called Dracula, motherfucker," and it's about, and he just went, "Shh, I know what it's about." And I'm like, all right. And he's like, "If it's not about what I think it's about, I know where you live."
Well, that gives new visual meaning to the whole deal. Erica, how did you come into the project? Can we talk a little bit about that too?
Yeah, it's actually not a very long story because Alex had already written the script and she sent it to me and asked if I was interested. It was just kind of out of the blue. And I loved it. And then almost immediately we were just working on this book. Like that's really the whole story. Alex was like, do you want to do this? I was like, yes, I want to do this.
All right. Well, I just want to say the title over and over again. Dracula, motherfucker. All right. Listen, I feel like I'm in a blaxploitation film. Well, look, let's get into the book. It starts in 1889 in Vienna, jumps to Los Angeles. I mean, I associate, in some way Vienna with horror. I tend to associate LA with noir. What's the connection? What's behind this?
A lot of the book is based around me trying to rethink and modernize Gothic horror. And there have been a lot of people trying to do that, usually men. And like rethinking all sorts of older genres, people tend to get really enmeshed in the trappings of it, like the old cities and the fog. And so when they put Dracula in London again or something like that and bring out the fog machines, it doesn't feel like anything new. It just feels like some sort of homage. And it's not really striking. Like you're not taking what's originally scary about Dracula and about Gothic horror in general and translating it so that modern viewers and modern readers can feel afraid. Or Crimson Peak, or the recent Moffat Dracula, which just, they were more about the creator's love for something which no longer exists than trying to make new people love it in a way which was relevant to them. I mean, I say this like setting a book in 1974, like when most of my readers weren't born yet. But the idea of putting Dracula in Los Angeles is Gothic horror for me is a lot about isolation and loneliness and fear of the character being forced like more and more and more separate as the story goes on. And some of the most lonely and scared I've been in my life has been in Los Angeles. I mean, I find Los Angeles a very scary city. There's, I walk down my neighborhood in New York. I know everyone on my street. Something happens to me on my block, like there's going to be someone I know who sees it and who probably steps in to stop it, or at least yells or something. Los Angeles, like you're just driving around on your own, alone in the dark.
Well, I guess that's why it seems to figure prominently. I mean, I brought up noir. How important is there some connection that you were seeking between like noir and horror? I
mean, a lot of my work is based in noir, so I never I have to make a conscious choice to exclude noir rather than making a conscious choice to include it. I don't really feel. I mean, there is a lot of noir in the book, but it wasn't meant to be a noir Dracula retelling. If anything, the influences and one of the reasons I wanted to bring Erica on board were very much more about graphic styles of representation. The entire embodiment of Dracula in the story, because the petty hill I will die on is that Dracula should not be handsome. It's just this weird sort of wish fulfillment thing. And I'm like, no. So we decided to recreate Dracula as something truly terrifying. Because if you look at terrifying men, they're generally not handsome, first of all. And second of all, I was really influenced by a lot of the Japanese anime and manga interpretations of supernatural characters from as far back as Hellsing, both the Hellsing anime and manga, to things like Pride in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, to a lot of the super flat art used in the dream sequences in Madoka Magica, which is one of my favorite anime. So in order to make Dracula something that could terrify everybody, we returned him to being this super powerful creature of the shadows that can be anywhere. So it takes apart a little bit of the logic of like, how did Dracula get from A to B? It doesn't matter. He's Dracula. He's not like having to hail a cab. Dracula on Uber.
Well, look, I want to bring Erica into this.
I just wanted to cut in real quick to say that I don't think that there is a big distinction between horror and noir, because a lot of horror, as it's appeared over the ages, is a response to something going on, and a lot of detective fiction occurred when people started living in cities more. And so there was a lot of this isolation in a packed place that was this new idea that was really terrifying. And so I think that they kind of go hand in hand a lot of ways. Like maybe you don't push the horror aspects as much all the time, but there is that anxiety around that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And you could argue that the Italian giallo films are where horror and noir really clearly meet, because they were specifically a very urban sort of terror.
Yep.
So I want to jump into, obviously I don't want spoilers, but I want to see if can you talk a little bit about the characters, and I want to bring you into this, as well, Erica, about the design of the characters and about the design of the of Dracula, which, as Alex says, it's very different. It's more of an evil force. Maybe we could describe it as that. But can you, because this book, besides also upending some of the visual characteristics of Dracula, I mean, it puts the female characters in the book into a different kind of relationship to it. So what can you tell us without, spoiling the damn thing?
Why don't we start off with Erica on design and stuff?
Sure.
Okay, I'll start on Dracula because he's the titular character here. In some of Alex's notes, she had brought up Klimt's Death in Life, which is one of his trademark piles of people all flooded in gold light, and there's babies and adults and all sorts of people, and then there's this skeleton figure in this hooded cloak with all these patterns on it and these hands poking out, and that was really what I fixated on. I kind of love the idea visually of this flat, ornate shape that was like clothing, but then just these gray, awful hands that connected it to humanity, but were still wrong and not quite human in some way. But I didn't want Dracula to be so completely devoid of any kind of relationship to what he once was, because having flesh makes Dracula something that can be defeated. Like, that's something that you can fight because it's not just this void that eats people. It's got human parts to it, even if that was a long time ago. With the brides, that was more just having fun with 70s fashion. I looked at a lot of old Harper's Bazaar spreads, and I have an art book of 70s photo shoots. That was just fun. It's always just a good time going through old stuff with them, because we can just sort of assume that they're doing all right. I wanted to make sure everything was up to date. Yeah, like in this older bit we're looking at, I was trying to make sure that I was finding old clothes, maybe not necessarily from Vienna, because we can assume they move around, but they were up to date, like to that year. And I was trying to do that with the other outfits when it came up later too, and make sure they were like up to date to that year in the 70s. But then with Quincy, I wanted to make sure everything was a little bit old, which is so annoying to do. You're like, all right, what would be a crappy TV in this particular year in the 70s? What would be a jacket that someone puts on because they think it's like their best jacket, but also you're poor, and so it's not a great jacket, or it was a good jacket like 6 years ago. So that's one of the things you have to think about a lot with like these designs, is that you're getting an idea of these characters from what they look like before they even say anything.
And
so
hey, I just want to jump in for a second, and Alex, at some point we do need to talk about the characters. Yeah, because she mentioned Quincy, but also there are the brides.
Yeah, this is very much a bride story. Coming out of, if you don't make Dracula handsome, so you take away the an overt sexual appeal, that transforms his nature to the brides a great deal and makes them much more interesting. Because if Dracula's super handsome, then they fall for him because he's hot, and that kind of takes away any activity on their part and any culpability in what they've done. I mean, in some ways, Gothic horror is the journey of the already damned. And you're watching people who have already damned themselves somehow finally essentially get what's coming to them. And what fascinated me about the brides is what fascinates me about about Melania Trump, about
Bride of Dracula.
About Harvey Weinstein's wife. And they married men who had A, terrible reputations, and B, were about as sexually appealing as Jabba the Hutt. And now, I don't mean to kink shame. If Jabba the Hutt revs your engine, bless you, go in peace, have fun. But you are in a minority. And I think, giving these women the agency that they went into this with their eyes wide open, that they weren't just victims. And then Baby Bulin, the starlet around whom the inciting incident of the book essentially rotates, she did what she chose her own damnation. Because she saw it, because in a world of being an actress in Hollywood in the 70s, she was probably so used to shitty compromises around sexuality that she kind of thought, honestly, how much worse can this be? And the answer is orders of magnitudes.
Yeah.
Always think that you're going to be the one that changes it. It's not going to be so bad for you, that you're smarter.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the thing about any abuser is that they're really good at what they do. It's a system. It works. Look up the stuff around Warren Ellis. He did that with 40 women.
Yeah.
It works. Those mind games work. Warren Ellis, another man who's not exactly, on the Luke Skywalker side of things. He's on the Jabba the Hutt side of things. But people did it. Smart, pretty, women who had theoretically other choices still did it. Why? He's good at what he does. And he's done it, he's practiced. And so it was taking this idea of women who actually were really interesting women who got involved in something and then realized that they really were doomed, that this really was awful. And the thing about surviving an abusive relationship also is that because of the way abuse works, you also have to become a little bit of a monster to get out of it. Talk to abuse victims. A classic abuser tactic is DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. So the abuser is the real victim. And so when an abuse victim frees themselves, they are often accused of all sorts of terrible things, both by the abuser and by their families. And also there's the shame of actually having gotten into it. So I'm taking these women as essentially abuse survivors, but people who were not fully innocent in entering into the pact that they did, and then expanding on their role. And dudes love Dracula. White dudes love them some Dracula, okay? And and all of the Dracula recastings, except for the Karen Kusama one, which I'm really looking forward to, they're all by dudes. And so the brides are just over here, they don't matter. They're just stupid, and they have big tits, and they're in nightgowns, and they float. Yes, I still remember Van Helsing. Never forget. And
You're breaking it down. Break it down for us, Alex. Break it down.
And so one of the reasons the brides have never been given much, have never given much of a role is guys don't know what to do with them. Because they don't understand why they would choose this, other than Dracula is hot.
Well, I want to jump in and ask you about Quincy Harker, obviously, too.
Okay, Quincy Harker's name. Yeah, Quincy Harker's name came in because I was rereading the Bram Stoker book, and at the end, like Mina and Jonathan's baby is named after all the members of the expedition, and he has the name Quincy Harker, which next to Peter Jackson, originally black name in white literature I have ever seen. Like that is a black name. Okay.
Now, black characters don't turn out too well. They usually don't turn out too well, or have their fortune is usually fixed in horror. But that's not the kind of horror story that you're doing.
No, I mean, I live in New York City. I have like what you would consider a normal New York City friends group, and it's weird for me to write a story without people who look like my friends in it. And so when I sort of started thinking the whole like.
Oh no.
I know. I was worried about this happening at some point. Well, it looks like technical difficulties. We were talking about Quincy Harker, black character. Tell you what, Erica, can you talk to us a little bit about it? Oh, here she's back.
I'm sorry. It's Spectrum. Thank you, Spectrum. You
mentioned the characters like the friends you know in New York.
Yeah.
Look like.
And I wanted to make Quincy a black character, but I also didn't want it to be like a point. I didn't want to be like that author who's like, look, I have a black main character, like give me attention, because that's really tiresome. So he's black. The story isn't really about race. I mean, obviously his race informs the way he interacts with the world around him and the way who he chooses to interact with, but it's not about his blackness, because I can't write that. I don't know enough to write that story. He's essentially a nocturnal creature anyway. His job is taking crime scene photos. He's like a 1970s version of Ouija, the New York crime scene photographer.
Well, like he makes his living off of the dead.
Yes, like so. There's already this parallel going on, and I figured that Dracula got around, which is why one of his brides is black, one of his brides is very much an Egon Schiele kind of like skinny redhead, and one of them is a very curvy Mediterranean girl. Because I think you can include like a normal range of characters in these stories. Very like you don't even have to think about it. You just do it and it's fine.
Yeah. But they're so charged. I mean, I just think that's one of the things that gives a narrative life. I mean, regardless of how much of racial conflict you may or may not want to put in it or read into it. Just like the female characters, their presence is different. Having this black character in it also, to me anyway, makes
it's a story about power. And, while Quincy has a lot of agency, does he necessarily have a tremendous amount of social power? No.
Yeah. Look, very quickly, I want to, we're getting close to taking more questions from the audience, but I wanted to ask Erica a little bit more about the drawing. Because the book has a lot. First of all, the color is wild, so I'd love to hear you talk about that. And I understand that the book is full. At the end, we have an afterwards where you kind of talk about how you conceived it. So maybe tell us a little bit about that, and because there's a large number of spreads in the book, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I laid this book out differently than I have any other book, because the first time I've done something where I knew that we had complete control over the outcome. Like there wasn't going to be an ad in the middle and I could decide how it would look. And so I wanted to design both pages, because when you're looking at a comic, you're seeing two pages at once. It's a different way of absorbing information than like reading prose or watching a movie. You're taking in a lot of visual information, even if you haven't gotten to that point of the story yet. As soon as you turn the page, like there's no getting around it. Like your brain is designed to understand what these symbols mean. And so on top of the legibility of a page, where you need to be able to set up each panel so that they flow into the next one so that someone knows how to read a series of pictures without having to think about it. I also wanted to have the 2 pages work together in that same way. And it was interesting. I think I might keep doing it as long as I can, have control over the design of the book, because it's literally how you're seeing it as a reader. And as for the color, I sketched this whole thing out digitally, so I was dropping the color, like just quick color in as I was just roughing out the pages, and the color really is there to help lead the eye. I don't feel it's necessary to use realistic color all the time because we're not dealing with realism. And I don't mean just because we're dealing with vampires. I mean, the way you take in a comic is so different than the way you take in moment to moment life. It's such an abstraction that why not keep abstracting further? Like we know, looking at the most realistically painted or even just photographs in a comic, that's not how you normally observe things. So why not keep going with that? We can use that to our advantage and have, like, the page we're looking at right now, we're literally using the color red to bring you down the page. And it's a tool that I am trying to figure out how to use in more ways. Just the whole act of constructing a story that you read visually is very interesting to me. And I like trying to figure out what it is that makes that work.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing, at the end of last year, like literally right before I started working on this, I had taught a workshop to a bunch of college students for like a month and a half. And so I really had to like sit down and think about all this stuff. And then I could just sort of immediately put it into action. And that was cool.
Dracula, motherfucker. Had to get one in there. Yeah. So look,
It's
tell me
it's our gift to like everyone walking into their comic shop in person, that they can be like, "Give me Dracula, motherfucker."
There you go. It goes right to the heart of the issue. Yeah. I mean, another question for Erica. Just look, you're so identified with Squirrel Girl. How is it the switch to the bright pop oriented cartoony character that you were doing there, and this really grim atmospheric work of horror?
It's not hard for me because my interests are far and wide. So both of these things live in my head simultaneously. It did not take a lot of effort to switch from one to the other, because generally I have one or the other on my brain at some point during the day. It's just not an issue for me at all. Like, I don't have to be steeped in it because it's already something that I'm interested in.
And I kind of knew, on Twitter and on Instagram, the work she does for fun around, I mean, obviously Squirrel Girl is fun, but around that. And I knew she was interested in horror. I knew she was interested in pulp. I knew I could like talk to her about anime. I knew she would get my Demi Moore striptease reference. So I had utter faith in her that she was just, because I knew she was like Squirrel Girl is amazing, but I knew she was so much more than Squirrel Girl, and I could just hand this to her and she would just go for it.
I love it. So look, we're getting to the point where we're going to take some questions from the audience. I've got a bunch of them already. Now, a lot of these questions, they're kind of variations on some of the things you've already asked. Let me see what I can find something. Let's see. Now we've got a question here, and this is going back to Erica, and it's also about colors. So this is from Bob Langer. I think, Erica, the colors in the first few pages look like a Mario Brava film or an Italian Giallo film. I think you mentioned that earlier.
Yes,
Alex
mentioned it. But yeah, that was a big influence. Like, if we're going to talk about 70s and horror and noir at the same time, Italian horror was where it was at, and like they,
Oh yeah.
like the other thing I was talking about, they were not concerned about realistic color when it came to emphasizing moments. Like if something was going on, that scene's just pink now. That's it. Like it's just bright pink, and if it sold the idea of a feeling, that was more interesting to those filmmakers than, you know, just filming a dark scene and making sure it looked dark, because, you know, we know what dark looks and feels like. It happens every day. But if you are trying to, you know, like you're manipulating people into feeling something, you may as well go for it.
Yeah.
Okay,
And,
let's.
yeah,
Go on, Alex.
Dario Argento and his party gels. I mean, like, you know, look at Suspiria.
Yeah.
Like it's magenta now. Sorry. Oh wait, no, it's green. And you know, he would just randomly put it like a gel down a light for the background, where like, you know, the foreground would be one color and then the background would be like bright magenta for no reason other than it looked cool.
All right, let's see. Now we're getting a bunch of questions really about you two working together. So I'm going to let you talk about that. One was like, how did you two decide to get there? You kind of touched on that, but if you want to talk a little bit more about how you work together, that might be really interesting. I mean, was there a lot of back and forth? Did the script change from what you wrote, Alex, to what Erica decided to draw?
I mean, the script, I showed it to Erica. She made a couple suggestions. I brought it back and like tweaked a few things because it'd been
I think we were super tiny.
I tend to write things way in advance, and I just write the whole thing, and then I'll tweak it or change it for whatever artist. I mean, because my scripts are very. I mean, Erica, you can probably speak more to this because you've seen more other people's scripts than I have. But I always consider my scripts fairly detailed. But you also get this health note at the front, going like, "I've given you all this detail. You can ignore it." Because also, she then hands the story back to me, and I letter it. And in comics, the writer doesn't usually letter their book unless they're a cartoonist who's like writing, drawing, and lettering, like Bone, like Jeff Smith's Bone. So I do this rare thing where like I'm very flexible because Erica can hand me back almost any art, and then I'll just fit the dialogue or write new dialogue to fit what she. More dialogue, sometimes removing it, etc.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty easy process. Like we were both pretty on board, and there was no drama.
Yeah.
It was a pretty drama-free project.
Teamwork.
Yeah. In terms of other things, I mean, I'd love to work with Erica again. Both of our schedules are a little full right now. We pitched a middle grade Campi book to DC, which got.
I forgot about that.
Oh, no.
Campi, what am I?
Yeah, Campi, Last Boy on Earth.
Uh-huh.
And DC sat on it for like a year and then went, I'm sorry, Campi isn't an important enough character. And we were just like, but he's got a tiger best friend. Like how, you know, but you know, we don't understand how.
How can we not sell a tiger best friend?
Important.
Got a little boy running around ruined New York City with a tiger best friend. Like how does this not appeal to 9-year-olds? But you know, it's not Batman, so no. So that got killed. It was going to be one of the DC Zoom Inc. books. And we haven't really pitched anything since. But Erica's on another project right now, and I just turned in 2 250-page graphic novels in a row that went off to print over the last 2 weeks. And I'm kind of just like, I'm dead.
I didn't make it clear. Alex gets work done. She's a worker. Anyway, Erica, I think I cut you off.
Oh, I was just telling Alex to take a week off.
she works.
I feel like
Let me ask you this.
Time.
Let me ask you this, and this is related to the last question. Not to give anything away, but is there a possibility of more to come from this series? Oh, I mean, it's not a series yet, but could it be a series?
I mean, it could. Like, we never really talked about it. You know, again, it was a story I wrote just to have fun and blow off a lot of steam because other than the two big graphic novels, I've got Bad Karma, which is syndicating at Panel Syndicate. We've got like 100 pages of it up. So like I had all these really, really big projects. I just wanted to do something short and sharp in this wonderful image 72-page hardback format. And it was, it was an easy size for Erica to work to because it wasn't a massive time commitment to her. She wasn't going to be spending like a year of her life drawing my like Dracula imaginings. And that's important. That's really important. We may come back. We'll see how it does,
Yeah. I have nothing against coming back to it. It's just, it wasn't part of the original plan, but it's definitely like, it was fun. And there's truly has to be more to talk about when it comes to like power and vampires and.
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually basing the question. This is really my question. I'm sort of basing it on kind of how the book ends. But
yeah,
I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
So another question here: working on a monthly comic as opposed to, an original graphic novel. I think this is really primarily for Erica, since you crank them out, Alex. Very good ones, but you get them done. So Erica, any serious differences, challenges to switching in the, essentially the format?
Well, I think the actual work isn't that different. The main difference is really that you don't have to worry about what people are going to say about what you're doing because no one owns the thing except for you and like one other person. So there's more freedom in that way. Like you don't have to worry about like what a major corporation wants you to do with their characters because they're your characters. And so it was a lot freer in that way, but ultimately you're still just drawing a lot of pages.
You're right. So we're getting a lot of questions about Dracula, motherfucker, the title that is. People really want to know, did your publisher get all upset? Was there pushback? Did booksellers get all bent out of shape? No,
it's fine. I mean, the fact we deliberately starred out. Some people were like, "Why'd you wuss out and star out the U and the C?" The answer is, some publisher software actually will pick out swears, and it made it acceptable to people who might have been sensitive about the swearing. I mean, I swear like a longshoreman, so I don't even notice. But no one seemed to mind. I mean, it's clearly a pulp horror, exploitation horror graphic novel. Like, it's not like, it's not meant for little kids or something. It's not for an audience that's going to necessarily object to it.
Right. Yeah, and it lets you know who it's for right away.
I mean, one of the proudest moments of my life was getting on the cover of Publishers Weekly with a cuss. I had like relatives writing in on Facebook about it. I saw you on Publishers Weekly.
I love it. There you go. That's what we're here for. Let's see. Well, one thing. This is another question from me, not from the audience. So whatever. I've asked you about this when we were talking about Bad Girls. I was asking about the role of violence, sort of about the role that women deal with as far as violence in genre works. So, can you talk about that a little bit? Was that on your mind when you put this book together?
I mean, violence is always on my mind in a way, because it's such a cornerstone of how we have to create stories. And especially like these days, like, you got to be, I feel that if you can read the room, like, you have to be more careful about why you show violence and who you show doing violence and what the consequences of that violence are. I mean, weirdly, the book that shows up most in is the Panel Syndicate book, Bad Karma, because it's about two ex-veterans. Basically, most of the bad guys are cops. And these two guys are trying to make it through the entire book without killing anyone. So they're actually, it's like the flip side of John Wick, And I was thinking about the John Wick films the other day about why they'd like gotten less interesting for me. And technically they are very interesting. And from a fight choreography viewpoint, they're wonderful. But, you know, the really effective violence is emotional and is character violence. And you have to care about the character, and you have to, like, the physical violence, while horrifying, doesn't really sit and ultimately mean anything to you as a reader. So when John Wick kind of like Donkey Kongs through all the dudes in John Wick 2, like it's like eating cotton candy. It's really enjoyable at the time, but you're done, and then you're hungry again, and it was like you ate nothing at all. I even feel that way about most of the recent Marvel films. So, you know, I ultimately don't know what I'm trying to say. I mean, I guess I'm extremely specific about the way I use violence, and it comes back to a very 1970s view. It's a very like macho 1970s auteur filmmaker view of the use of violence. I mean, it comes straight out. I use violence to, you know, show you the darkness in your own soul. And
yeah, I think
it just is like all the kicking and bone breaking and people getting hit by cars. Like it just doesn't land. And I don't want to look at it right now here in 2020.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I think about a lot too is, as someone who takes in a lot of horror, is that it's kind of the genre with the most like female leads in it, really. But it's a lot of sexy violence happening, like not necessarily sexual violence, because like that also happens, but like violence that's also sexy. Like it's someone having violence done to them, but their top fell off. And it was kind of nice to not have that, but still have these characters. And like we already know that the violence has been done to them because it's a vampire story, and that's just the nature of how vampires work. And but it was fun to do that next part, like do I spit on your grave, but without the first act.
Well, you know, there's also a fair number of questions kind of about, you know, I mean, you mentioned this, maybe you can talk a little bit more about Dracula influences, Dracula antecedents across different media. Isn't it, isn't there a 1960s movies, Bride of Dracula? Any of this stuff figure in at all? You've mentioned some things, but maybe you could talk about that a little bit more as we wind down.
I mean, I had a bit of a rewatch of things, but I tend not to, when I'm about to embark on a genre story, I tend to like bar myself from watching anything in that genre because I don't want to be unduly influenced by it or copying it. You know, I think I have enough of a foundation. I mean, if anything, it was anime.
Yeah, but yeah, which you mentioned obviously earlier. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, like I tried to. I mean, I didn't seek out vampire stuff at the time, but I did watch like Beyond the Valley of the Dolls for that like psychedelic vibe.
Mm-hmm. And Count Yorga.
I feel like we weren't trying to do the other vampire stuff. Like even a movie like Blackula, which is about a black vampire in the 70s, it was still not.
I think that's when I saw
we were doing. Like,
yeah, it comes back to that idea of, you know, taking the trappings of a genre and recreating those because you love the genre, and really burrowing into what makes that genre scary and trying to do that. And we were more interested in just moving aside all of the usual, like the velvet capes and the women lying on beds with artfully. And there's even an entire conversation about that between Quincy and one of the lower caste like tabloid editors, you know, like could have gotten you triple for boobs. Right. And so, you know, we were acknowledging the reader's prurient interest in sexuality in that, you know, in some ways in the way like The Handmaiden did, which I love. but it was about getting to the heart of it was about rethinking what really was the heart of Gothic horror, not looking at the continuation of the accessories.
Yeah, a lot of times the accessories just become strange too. Like, why are his clothes from like the Edwardian period still good? Like,
yeah,
why haven't those rotted off his body at this point? It's at a certain point, you're kind of getting across the idea that this person is just continuously forcing this lifestyle, and that just becomes a weird question in and of itself. And
or you're trying to make it so hyper modern that it looks weird, that it's like you feel like you're trying too hard, and it's like modern vampires, they dress like us, No.
Whereas I think the sweet spot for me is like Fright Night, where it's just a guy. He looks like a guy, but actually he's this terrifying predator next door. But he's not necessarily dressed up. He's just in a coat.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what? And on that note, you guys have done your best to kind of bring Dracula into the current moment. I'm just encouraging the audience to go out and check out Dracula, motherfucker. It's it's a whole new experience. Look, thanks to both of you, Alexi Campi, Erica Henderson. It's a chilling and eye-popping book. Go out and get it. It's great to talk to you both. And on that note, let me just say very quickly, thanks for watching Books on Tap Live. The next one is coming on October 21st. It'll be with New York Times best-selling author, illustrator, Jerry Craft, the hardest working man in the graphic novel business, who will discuss his new graphic novel, Class Act, a sequel to his award-winning graphic novel, New Kid. You won't want to miss it. You can sign up to receive a reminder of the event at publishersweekly.com/booksontap live. Hope you can join us then. It's been a blast.